Hello, this is Will Faerber from Art to Ride, and today we're looking at another submission by our friends from Sweden, Tytti and her horse Usko. It's great to see her working. Looks like it's quite cold there. Every time I see this horse, I'm so struck by how much better he's moving and more actively. When I first saw him, he looked like his feet were rather glued to the ground. But he's really starting to move through his back wonderfully. Now she's working on Canter here in this video, and we can see how in this first Canter he was kind of tossing his head up in the air with each stride there, and what we'll see is later on he begins to not do that, which tells us that he's not working over his back. When you see the horse having to lift its head like that with each stride, he's basically pushing off of the front end instead of engaging behind and coming through and lifting itself and carrying itself through from the hindquarters in the Canter. And it improves as she goes along here. And from what I saw just, a few months ago when we began this process with this horse, he's just moving so much better. His neck actually looks like it's probably 2 feet longer than the first time I saw him. He's moving much more actively behind, and she's doing a great job of keeping him going on a nice big circle here in the Canter. And just what she's doing is a very good thing, that she's not cantering for a long period of time. She's cantering a little bit and letting him come back to the trot. Of course, once in a while, if they try to break, we have to keep them going. It always has to be our idea to make those transitions back and forth. But we never want to canter for long periods of the time, as the horse will just get tired and get more on his forehand. So once again, trotting builds the strength to allow a horse to canter correctly. And she has done that with this horse. Another thing you'll notice if you go back and look at some of the earlier submissions of this horse is how he has begun to lift his belly. Once again, correct dressage, it's like Pilates for human beings. We're not trying to just lift the back. They have to engage the entire core. So we're seeing his stomach coming up and beginning to see a line there along the edge of the rib cage there where we can see he's pulling up through his back. And that's exactly what we want to see. So for me, this horse is developing absolutely beautiful. Right there, the trot is absolutely wonderful. That's really maximum for him right there, is where I'd like to see him stay most of the time. And once again, you see how as she's doing these transitions, as it goes on here, the transitions are getting easier. He's not throwing his head so high up in the air. There he's cantering over his back a little nicer as he starts to stretch into the contact. And that's really good and is what we're looking for. So once again, it's very clear to see. You can see right there, he kind of pulled up a little bit and got on his forehand there as he pulls his head up. And the transitions are still a little difficult for him. That's understandable for his level of development. So once again, we want to still keep most of our work in the trot, but introducing the canter like this, I think this horse is ready to introduce the canter. And once again, look how beautifully he's swinging under his body, that is, with his hind legs in the trot. And we can see that bicycling motion, so to speak. If we put a white dot, for instance, in the middle of the hock, it should look like it's making a circle when the horse is in a working trot. And this horse is clearly beginning to do that. Once again, you see how difficult for him the downwards transitions are, which are harder than upwards transitions. So you can see he gets into the canter pretty easily, but he still comes out of it kind of on his forehand. But that's improving all the time, and once again, that will just improve all by itself. Once again, look, here is where we want him. Once again, look at the belly. You get a clear shot there, how he's pulling up through his top line there and pulling his belly up and engaging. And this canter is looking better there. That's good there. That's where we'd like to see it. It's very nice. And you can say that, once again, people are very often confused about when a horse is on the forehand or not. A horse can have its head way high in the air, and people think that, oh, he's not on the forehand because his head is up. But you have to watch what the legs are doing. Whether the horse is on the forehand or not is dependent on whether the horse is lifting through its back and how much it's engaging the back end. So in reality, a horse can be stretching down, and some people will say, and this is the criticism, that people, old school kind of people who have very little education, who have this idea that the horse's head has to be pulled up for it not to be on the forehand, don't understand that because they're looking and starting at the wrong place. As correct trainers, we want to look at the back end of the horse. What the front end is doing is just an outcropping, so to speak, of what's happening behind. So once again, he comes back to the trot. Look how clearly and active his hind legs are now. Once again, I suggest you go back, and this is a good shot of his belly, how that's pulled up now. That's what we want to see. Now, there's his optimal trot right there. That's where we'd like to see him go. So again, a little slower right there and not quite as deep. But once again, compared to what we saw only a few months ago with this horse, this is a huge improvement. We can also see behind the saddle there that it's really starting to fill up. We see a nice roundness through the loin area there. So we want to see very often, You know, I don't need to see a horse being ridden to tell you how it's been trained. Just walk in the stall and look what it looks like, you know. If it's lower back, if it's sway back to start with, that's an extreme example. But when we see horses and you see the saddle and you see it looks like there's a big hole behind the saddle, no matter how high the horse is raising its legs, once again, the difference between a leg mover and a back mover. In dressage, the object is to get horses moving through their back. Leg movers in the extreme are things like Tennessee walkers and saddlebreds, where, you know, they're really just lifting their legs, but there's no thrust off the ground. That's what the difference, you know. When people who ride these gaited horses, they talk about how comfortable it is. You know, it's like sitting in your easy chair, you know. And what the reason for that is the horse have no thrust off the ground. They're lifting their legs up high, but there's no thrust pushing them forward. And of course, that's a very inefficient way for the horse to move, and of course leads to damage to the horse. This is why we see all these gaited horses going lame at such an early age, and why now we see so many dressage horses going lame at such an early age. This is a good walk she comes back to, and I like that downwards transition that he made there, in that he stepped into the transition rather than just jamming on the brakes. And of course, this is what you want to do. You want to come back and give the horse some moments of stretch. So that was good work in the canter. Keep it up, and he will just continue to improve. Very well done indeed. Now, already in the walk here, you know, I'm seeing a much better walk than we saw in the early tapes. You can see he's a little bit slow right there, but once he gets going there, we'll see that he's swinging pretty well over his back. This is getting a little inactive here now. You can see how when it does, watch how the back, you can almost see it hollow out from underneath you there when the hind legs kind of fall out behind. So a more swinging active walk would be good there. Getting into the trot work here, he's quite hollow right there. See how the hind legs are barely moving under the body. So watch what effect it has as she gets him to soften and stretch into the contact. Watch what happens with the back legs, not the front legs. This idea of looking at the front end, you know, is what we have to get away from in real dressage training. We want to look at what the back end is doing. That's a nice trot, and he's also getting so nice and soft in the bridle, I see, with this horse. This is a huge improvement over what I saw, you know, just a few months ago. Hind legs, even when he raises his head there, the hind legs continue to move pretty well. I would like to see him stretching a little deeper, which I know he does there, and that's, you know, she's working in some pretty cold conditions there, so an occasional trip, and the footing doesn't look absolutely perfect. So that's acceptable. And expectable is more the word I was looking for here. Now, this is a good working trot for this horse right here. That's very nice. Got a little hollow there again. She softens him, get him a little longer through that neck. There, like that. And look how beautiful. And once again, now look how much looser the hind legs look and how much more supple they look when he gets into that position. He can still be swinging a little more actively and stretching a little more. There we go, right there. That's what I'd like to see. Now, that's very good. Now, that's that horse working completely over his top line. You know, he may not look like you know, the most expensive Grand Prix horse in the world. And that's also what we have to get people out of the idea of trying to make one horse look like another horse. You know, all horses are different, the conformations are different. And while our objective in training is the same with all of them, they're not going to look the same. So very often people today, they look at these very expensive warm bloods, many of them who are not moving through their back but have extravagant front leg movement, and they try to copy that with their horses that aren't such great movers to disastrous effect. So once again, this is a good working trot on him. This is really nicely done. And you can see the difference when he hollows there. Look how the back legs, when he lifts his head, how the back leg stops moving. So you can clearly see the effect that has. As soon as he drops down and seeks the contact again, look how even and steady he looks. You know, so every horse any horse can be improved immensely by correct dressage training. But they're doing a wonderful job with this horse, and I know it's very cold in winter there, and they're not able to work as much as they'd like to be able to, but still yet this horse is improving every time I see him. Once again, the canter, you can see how he kind of had to hollow a little bit and didn't really come through, and he's bracing a little bit there. So we want to get him to stretch into it. I wouldn't do too much of this under saddle yet till it starts to look better on the lunge line and is more consistently around. But the trot is looking wonderful. Right there, once again, this is what will help you. If you keep trotting like that, pretty soon you'll have a wonderful canter and it'll happen all by itself. So once again, this is Will Faerber with our friend Tytti van Hela and her horse Usko in Sweden. Great to see them again and much improved. Will Faerber from Art to Ride, and we'll see you next time.